Have you ever thought about how many of the world's most iconic video game franchises comes from Japan? I'm talking about truly massive franchises like Resident Evil, Pokémon, Final Fantasy, Super Mario, Monster Hunter, Dark Souls, Persona, and many, many more. And though we certainly have some really big game franchises in the West too, they appear to be fewer, they seldom run for as long, and more often end up being rebooted or eventually left in an IP holding hell. Why is this the case? What allows these Japanese IPs to keep on going, reinvent themselves, become beloved franchises that can stand the test of time? I believe that there is a lot that Western studios could learn from studying how these franchises are handled. And I believe that we can break down these franchises into 3 different categories that will explain their staying power. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what those categories are, using specific examples to show you how Japan is outclassing the West when it comes to franchise staying power. Category 1. Games that share a continuity. Examples of Japanese games in this franchise category are games like Resident Evil, Pokémon, Metal Gear Solid, and Street Fighter. These games exist in the same universe, on the same timeline, the timeline matters, and they often have recurring characters. The games are fully independent and don't necessarily connect with each other from game to game, but if you play them all, you will see spillover or the grander story. This way of setting up a franchise gives you a lot of creative freedom. Just look at Resident Evil. Different stories in every game, and even the genre shifts from survival horror to more action horror, from fixed camera to third person to first person. They can make several games where fan favorite characters like Leon Kennedy don't show up. But they can also make several games where he is the main character, or at least one of them. They've got this cool world and setting, but the types of stories they can tell and how they can tell them is just completely freed up by the structure. The same thing goes for the Pokémon games. They are experienced individually, but they exist in the same world, on a timeline, with recurring characters and Pokémon, but you absolutely don't need to know anything about one of the other games to play another. And thus, every few years, they can introduce hundreds of new Pokémon in a new region with a new story, and no one goes out and says, "Oh, that is not a Pokémon game." And of course, there are a couple of Western examples that does this decently well, such as GTA, for example. I'm not claiming they don't exist, but they are fewer in numbers and usually come with more caveats. The next category, on the other hand, is one that older Western gamers should be quite familiar with. Category 2. Games that focus on characters. Some strong Japanese examples are Mario, Sonic, and Mega Man. These games have one or more characters, or mascots, that have several games, not in any kind of grand timeline. Essentially, every new game is a simple one-off story that have little to no repercussion for anything greater than said individual game. Mario is a perfect example of this. None of the games are really connected. I mean, Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 don't even connect. But all the characters are the same recurring cast, but in similar situations. This is the ultimate version of having creative freedom. There are certain expectations on Mario or Mario-related games, but in general, as long as beloved characters, such as Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Bowser, appear, it will still be considered a Mario game. The same thing goes for Sonic. Beloved characters, there are expectations, but in the end, put the characters into a fighting game, adventure game, or a racing game, it's still Sonic. Sonic tried to force a continuity at one point, and the mixed results of that era really proves my point. Games that focus on mascot characters, made for having one-off fun adventures, should avoid continuity and timelines. The West used to have quite a few examples in this category, such as Crash Bandicoot and Gex. But those franchises are looking worse for wear these days. And honestly, I think the West has an issue of combining Category 1 and 2 too much. Tomb Raider is currently working on its continuity, where Lara Croft grows older, going through her adventures in a clear timeline, and this will eventually lead to a necessary reboot or end of the series, since she'll eventually die or become too old to adventure. Or she will have to pass on the torch to a new character, which is hard when the franchise is fully built around her. She is the mascot for Tomb Raider. I talked about Leon Kennedy in Category 1. He is honestly not much less iconic than Lara, and he is also growing older. But when he dies, the Resident Evil franchise moves on without him. As things stand right now, that isn't the case for Lara Croft and Tomb Raider. And this is just one of many examples I could provide, but I simply don't have the time to go through them all, since it's now time for the third and by far most interesting category. Category 3. Games that focus on a concept. Some Japanese examples are Persona, Final Fantasy, and Monster Hunter. I call them games that focus on a concept, but it's technically even more loose than that. They focus on a franchise-wide concept, feeling, gameplay mechanics, and/or style, but have little to no proven connection amongst themselves. When you start up a brand new Persona mainline game, you expect a very specific anime style, fancy menus, social links, turn-based combat, Persona collecting, serious themes, and so on and so on. These are the concepts I'm talking about. But don't get me wrong, technically Persona does have a continuity. And there are a couple of cameos here and there, but outside of the Velvet Room, which I would say plays into a concept, there aren't many strong connectors between the games. If Persona 6 came out tomorrow and had a completely new cast, as they tend to do, and didn't mention anything or anyone from the previous games, except for Igor and the Velvet Room, it would still, very obviously, be the next installment in the Persona franchise. But the absolute strongest example of a concept-focused game has to be Final Fantasy. The characters aren't the same, the world isn't the same, the systems aren't the same. I mean, Final Fantasy XIV is even an MMO. So what concept do these games share then? Well, they share icons or mascots like chocobos. They share magic systems to a large extent. They share a lot of general themes, often of rebellion. And they share an expectation of being incredibly high quality and very cinematic. This is the epitome of having a long-lasting franchise with the ultimate creative freedom to tell new and interesting stories. And this is the direction I hope some Western games like Expedition 33 will go in. I am hoping that Clair Obscur in some ways can turn into a Western Final Fantasy. The only real example of current concept franchises from the West that I can think of is the Dark Picture Anthology. You have set expectations for what those games should be like, the vibe, the acting, the gameplay and so on. But it's an anthology, so they don't have the same characters nor the same world. It's been a long video, but to summarize, the categories that Eastern franchises tend to stick to are either shared continuity, focus on characters and mascots, or focus on concepts. I think that putting a primary focus on one of these concepts helps to build a long-lasting, evergreen franchise, since it allows for creativity and exploration of new stories and new ideas that truly lets a series reinvent itself before it dies or requires a reboot. And if Western studios and publishers pick up on this, I think it could really change the never-ending IP holding and rebooting of franchises for the better. But that's just my opinion on the subject. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments. If not, I'll see you next time.